But let's break down all of this with MSNBC senior Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale, MSNBC's Laura Barron-Lopez at the White House for us, our correspondent Ariel Hickson on the ground at the National Mall, and senior writer at the Dispatch, David Drucker. Ali, we're at the 2-week mark. Hard to believe that. And things at the leadership level seem like they're gridlocked more than ever.
Hard to believe, and yet quite obvious, given the fact that both sides have been very clear in maintaining their positions. And you listen to the way that leadership is setting the tone over the weekend into yesterday, and you can see they're not talking to each other. They're very much continuing to talk past each other. Listen.
You've heard Chuck Schumer say breathlessly, I just want the 4 leaders to get in a back room and make a deal. We're not doing that. Republicans are eager to return to the actual negotiating table, to finish out full-year appropriations and do work on all the other matters before us, but we won't negotiate in smoke-filled back rooms.
Speaker Mike Johnson and I have not met. They've made the decision. Donald Trump has not given them permission to meet, Katie. And we know that until Donald Trump gives them permission to meet, they're going to continue to hide.
So, look, most of these shutdowns actually do end by leadership getting together, smoke-filled room or not, to actually hammer out what's going to allow their members to take the votes that they need to take to end the government shutdown. In this situation, it's also likely to include President Trump because of the role that he's played, especially among House Republicans, being able to push them to vote for things that politically and otherwise they sometimes wouldn't be able to vote for. For example, some of these members of the House Freedom Caucus ultimately voted yes on the continuing resolution that's at the heart of this, and they're not members that typically vote for continuing resolutions at all. So again, we've seen the power of the president to move some votes within the House Republican Conference, and that's likely to be a dynamic worth tracking here. Now, in terms of what we're going to end up seeing today, we're going to see the Senate come back to town. They're going to start taking votes a little bit later this evening. We don't expect those votes to have any major changes within them. That means that they still don't have the votes they need to reopen the government, leaving us exactly where we started this 2 weeks ago and threatening to stretch into historic territory.
Lots of smoke, but no room yet. We are expected to hear from Mike Johnson any moment now. He's been addressing reporters every single day since this began, and we will dip into this if we get any headlines out of it. But Ariel, the shutdown is starting to really impact normal people, everyday lives, other facets of society. You are outside of the Smithsonian right now. What kind of impacts are you seeing?
Well, you can really feel that impact here on the National Mall, where Smithsonian museums are now closed. And the Smithsonian is the world's largest museum institution. They have 21 different museums. 11 of them are right here in D.C., including the Museum of Natural History right behind me, which is one of the more popular ones. And these museums rely on federal funding. They rely on about 62% of that for their budget. And so moving forward, I think the concern here is how it's going to impact the community. They rely on so much foot traffic down here. Millions of people frequent this area every single year. And what you have to think about are the small businesses, the local restaurants, cafes, bookshops, gift shops, all of the above. They're going to be impacted in the future. Now, they released a tweet kind of detailing what they're going to do moving forward to prepare. They said that we will update our operating status as soon as the situation is resolved. We do not plan to update social media other than to inform you of the changes to our operating status. So their social media is going to go dark. And we have to note as well that the National Zoo is also part of the Smithsonian. They did confirm that those animals will be fed and well cared for. But once again, I mean, as I'm looking around, there's so much less people walking here between tourists, federal workers that are furloughed. That's where we're going to see the impact in the next couple of days, weeks, or however long that this shutdown continues, Ariel.
Yeah, that ripple effect continues. And Laura, the administration has used official channels to blame Democrats for this shutdown and the impacts that we're seeing, despite clear laws banning that. So what are they doing, and how are they trying to use airports?
No, that's right, Ariel. Since the start of this shutdown, Ali and I actually reported that the administration was sending messages through official government channels telling federal employees that they should blame Democrats, that this was the fault of Democrats, even advising some federal employees who were furloughed to put in their out-of-office messages that Democrats were at fault for the shutdown. Now, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has cut a video that they want to play in airports that again blames Democrats. Take a listen.
It is TSA's top priority to make sure that you have the most pleasant and efficient airport experience as possible while we keep you safe. However, Democrats in Congress refuse to fund the federal government, and because of this, many of our operations are impacted, and most of our TSA employees are working without pay. We will continue to do all that we can to avoid delays that will impact your travel. And our hope is that Democrats will soon recognize the importance of opening the government.
But multiple airports have refused to play that message, calling it political messaging, saying that it politicizes the impact of the government shutdown. Those airports that are refusing include Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Buffalo, Charlotte, North Carolina, Cleveland, Ohio, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. Now, we asked the White House as well as the Homeland Security Department if they had a response to the fact that these airports are saying they don't want to play this message. So far, the Homeland Security Department has not responded. A White House spokesperson did respond, Abigail Jackson, saying that the White House isn't going to shy away from sharing the truth with the American people. And Jackson also repeated the false claim that Democrats want to give health care to undocumented immigrants. But the White House did not directly address the fact that these airports are saying they don't want to play this message. Ariel.
David, the White House is more than willing to blame the Democrats, but apparently won't sit down with them to try to hammer all of this out. Why is that, in your opinion?
Well, because this is about power politics, right? I mean, these shutdowns always begin as a disagreement over policy. They're framed as a disagreement over policy. Once you get out of the first week, people really settle in, and it becomes about power and who's going to cave and who's not going to cave. And we've heard that from Speaker Mike Johnson. There's going to be no negotiation over the Obamacare subsidies, even though most Republicans, or at least a good number of Republicans, will vote for them eventually when they make their way to the House and Senate floor, because a lot of their constituents depend on these subsidies and want these subsidies. But if Republicans agree to hold a negotiation in response to the Democratic Party's instigated shutdown, which is what this is, which is how they have framed it, they did this because they wanted to force this issue, then Republicans will look weak. That's how they look at it. And then it will signal to Democrats that they can wield the filibuster again to extract more concessions out of Republicans. Trump obviously doesn't like that, but House and Senate Republicans on their own don't like that. And look, it brings me back to the 2013 shutdown Republicans instigated over Obamacare. It started that way. The president refused to give in on his signature policy. And then at the time, we were facing a debt ceiling crunch. The debt ceiling had to be raised. Republicans then, looking for a way to win the shutdown or get something, anything out of it, pivoted and asked the president to negotiate over the debt ceiling. And you know what he told them? I'm not negotiating anything until you reopen the government, because I'm not going to reward this kind of tactic. And that's what you're seeing from Republicans here.
Okay. Well, Laura, the administration has started mass layoffs. We are keeping an eye on what that could mean for so many federal workers. But on the issue of military pay, which has become sort of a flashpoint issue, the White House figured out a workaround.
No, that's right. So thousands so far have been laid off of federal employees, but the president announced over the weekend that military service members are expected to receive their next paycheck on October 15th. And he directed the Pentagon to use all available funds. Now, we were told that specifically research and development funds will be used to pay service members. And then yesterday, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said that the Coast Guard will be also receiving their pay through a, quote, innovative solution. The DHS Secretary didn't exactly specify what that innovative solution was, but in her post on X, she appeared to be suggesting that it would be funding that comes from that big spending bill that Republicans passed earlier this summer.
David, President Trump oversaw the longest shutdown in history. That was 34 days at the time. That one ran so long, partly because the Pentagon was fully funded throughout it. And we also saw some maneuvers from the White House to prolong this one. It kind of seems like this is just an incentive for both sides to drag this out.
Yeah, I mean, the more the motivations for ending the shutdown are eliminated by the administration, the less likely lawmakers are going to feel pressured to do anything about putting this thing to bed. And look, President Trump doesn't like to listen to Congress anyway, right? He's been impounding funds, he's been redirecting funds, he's been firing employees in defiance of statutory civil service law. And so I think he'd like nothing more than to continue to fund the parts of the government that he likes, not have to fund the parts he doesn't. And I mean, I'm being a little tongue in cheek here, but part of me wouldn't be surprised if at some point he just said, I'm using my emergency authority as the president to reopen the government. I'll spend money as I see fit, and I don't need Congress. And Congress, at least so far this year, has been content to defer to Trump at every turn. At no point have they told the president, this is our power, and we agree with you on policy. You don't have a right to do that. It's up to us. And this might be the opening he needs to even take more control over the appropriations process.